Greetings, test takers. This is Dean Tenney coming to you from my studio here in fabulous Las Vegas. This is a companion 15-minute or so lecture to the previous one, which was a lot of test takers get confused that credit means bearish or short means bearish. And in most circumstances it does, except when you're short a put or a credit put spread. And I illustrated that in the last one. Same thing here. A lot of people, test takers, get confused that long or debit means bullish, and in most circumstances it does, except again when it comes to these puts. So the puts are the ones that people struggle with. So what I want to do is illustrate two scenarios in which you're long or you have a debit and you're actually bearish, not bullish. And it's a common thing that people get hung up on. So let's look at our first example here. There's a lot of different ways to do or talk about options, and you need some kind of a process. And the process I follow when I heard the word long, buyer, owner, holder is somebody has a choice or right. Then I have a 50-50 about what they have a choice or right to do. And particularly on puts, I always like to make a note to myself beneath the leg, not testable, that's called an option leg, what that is. And this is a choice or right to sell or put the stock at the strike price. So that's the first thing I like to do is kind of say, okay, what am I looking at? XP means strike price. And then once I do that, I like to get my setup. My setup is going to be tracking the money in and out. And so I say, okay, well, I paid 9 points here. I paid 9 points. I'll put that in red. Get a font here. And I paid that 9 points. What's going on with my... to be able to sell the stock at 175. So that's what I have as a choice to sell the Apple at 175. Now, you know, the break even, you can memorize, I'll put that here in a minute, you could memorize that the break even it puts is strike price less premium. Strike price, which in this case, minus premium. A good mnemonic is put down, and that equals break even. In this case, that's going to be 175 minus 9, which gives us our break even at 166. But if you get good at tracking money in and out, I like to use dollars out, dollars in. Some people like to use plus signs, you know, whatever floats your boat. You can say, well, ultimately, they're going to offer you 4 choices on your exam. I paid 9 points to be able to stick it to somebody, sell it, or put it to somebody 175. And then I can just shop the answer set and say, okay, well, what happens if I buy the stock at 166 and I exercise my put? Do I indeed break even? Yes, I do. I have the same dollars out as dollars in. Now, another reason that the T is very helpful is because you might have a lot of things going on in the question. So they test phraseology. They might say your customer goes long, 1 Apple, July 175, put at 9. When the stock is at 166, your customer buys the stock in the open market and exercises his put. And if you don't have a T in tracking the money, it gets a little difficult. Now, ultimately, you could just compare 166 and say, oh, that's my break even. That's fine, memorizing break evens. But it gets more complicated. Maybe you need to be able to track the money. Now, what I like my best case scenario to be, well, again, let's just put an arrow here and remind ourselves that where we want the stock to be is below 166. And ideally, the stock is 0, because if the stock is 0, I paid 9 points to be able to sell at 175. So the best case is I get 100 shares out of the trash can. Now, again, I don't believe in putting all the zeros in here, particularly because break even is expressed per share. So I wouldn't put 916.6 and 17.5. I do things on a per share basis. Then when I'm all done, say, okay, what's that look like? So here, that's 0 is the best case scenario. So as we net those, the most I'm going to make is when the stock goes from the strike price, 175, minus the premium all the way to 0, or break even to 0, or break even, whatever gets you there. But ultimately on the test, what you need to be able to tell me is the max loss here is $16,600, right? If I net those two columns, that's the great thing. Again, if you can track, money and you're not struggling with contract specifications, you ultimately can just, don't need to memorize anything. So now I'm just netting the columns. Be careful when you're adding those numbers. I'm adding those numbers. Those numbers are not from given information or anything. That's just me netted columns. So, you want to make sure you practice your mechanics, so you're not fumbling around with that kind of thing. Anyways, max loss. And this sounds kind of bad, but it's actually pretty good. Now, if I'm wrong, Apple is 175 or higher, and the contract expires worthless. And that sounds like a bad thing, but that's a good thing. That's why people like to buy options, because if you're wrong, you're just going to lose your premium. There's other things you could do to be bearish on Apple, and a lot of them are more foolish, meaning you could lose a lot more money than 9. But hey, if I could lose even less than 9, that would even be better, right? I mean, right now, I've got to be right about 3 things. Got to be right about direction. I'm saying Apple's going down. I got to be right about the timing. I'm saying this is going to all take place between now and the 3rd Friday in July. And I got to be right about how much downward volatility. In all options speculations, you're either buying or selling volatility. Here I'm buying downward volatility, and I need 9 points to cover my out-of-pocket cost. I joke, if I was going to teach you options, I'd make you buy one. Once you're out of pocket, you figure out pretty quickly how it's going to go. So what I might want to consider doing, I might want to consider selling a lower strike to help me pay for the higher strike. So what I might want to do instead here is a put spread. Now, again, you can do it any way you want. Our time together is always buffet. But what I like to do is say, okay, what am I looking at? Again, I'm looking at a choice to sell the stock, the Apple, at the strike price. And that's that top leg there. I like to stack my legs too. So regardless of how they give it to me on my exam, I like to put, my strikes up next to each other, because it makes it easier. This is a vertical or price spread, just makes it easier. And this is an obligation to buy the Apple, buy the stock at the strike price. I really believe doing this in puts, and that's why I'm carving out these extra couple lectures on puts. Okay, so that's what's going on. The next thing I like to do is track the money. And it looks like I've got 9 out for the 175 put. And I've got 4 in for the 160. And so one thing we want to be able to do, is identify this as a spread. The spread is when you're long and short the same type of contract. And so again, if we're looking at this, another way I could have done this is I could have said, okay, well, that's money out. This is money in. And so ultimately, this is a debit spread. I've got more money out than in. And that'll be important. So, whether you use T's or however you get it done, right? So I could net these two and say, okay, well, ultimately, I'm out 5 points. Again, it would be messier not to do that. So let's put that there. This is a net debit. And whenever we have a net debit, that's going to be our max loss. Now, a couple of good things here, test takers. It's easier for me to cover my out-of-pocket cost if it's only 5 points. And losing 5 points is even better than losing all of it. So over here, in terms of our max loss, let's put that over here. The 175 put is the one we bought for 9. And we brought in 4 for this over here. And so worst case is the contracts expire. The difference was 5. Now the difference is 0. And so that's my worst case scenario, is I lose that 5 points. All right, so we've got that going on. Now, the other thing about spreads that we want to be aware of is that the gain and the loss always equals the difference in the strikes. So there's 15 points to be made or lost. And of that 15 points, we have spent 5. So 5 plus something equals this. I'm going to illustrate this in there in our thing here in just a minute. But the maximum gain is the difference in the strikes. Let's just get a smaller font here. You know, after you stay minion driven, then you can think about it. But, you know, here what's going on is somebody sticks it to me at 160. So let me just show you how that plays out on the T. So here is the 9 I paid for. Let me get a little bigger font. Here is the 9. And here is the 4. And then what happens is, you know, best case, I do want to exercise. By the way, when we have a debit spread, I'm just illustrating this, by the way, we definitely want to exercise. Debit, exercise, widen, you'll be right every time. And I'm just showing you what happens if the contracts get exercised. What happens if the contracts get exercised is somebody's going to stick it to me at 160. And then I'm going to stick it to the next guy. I'm going to exercise my 175 put. Again, as we said, if you get good at the T, it's helpful because, you know, you can track all the stuff going on. And when you got lots of stuff going on, it becomes a little more difficult to track it. But, you know, somebody sticks it to me, I go, wonderful. You go, are you okay? Yeah, because I'm just going to stick it to the next guy at 175. And if you net those out, you'll see that's my 10 points, the difference between 169 and 179. So there's my max gain of 10 points. Now, if you don't get to the gain and the loss, always equals the difference in the strikes, and you have to memorize that the maximum gain at a debit spread is the difference in the strikes, you know, less than that debit. Now, the larger premium dominates the position. And so what we're showing you is, again, that debit doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be a bullish position because the larger premium dominates here, which is the higher strike puts. The higher strike puts always have the greater premium and always be the dominant leg. But in terms of doing the break even, we're going to use our mnemonic push. And push stands for put subtract from the higher. So what we're going to do here to get the break even is we're going to take the higher strike, 175. By the way, it's easier for Apple to go down 5 points than it is for Apple to go down 9 points, which is the whole point of a debit spread, is I'm lowering my out-of-pocket cost. And by doing so, I'm also lowering the amount of downward volatility I need. I'm just putting an arrow there to remind myself that I'm bearish. Now, let me show you how that works in terms of the T. So, you know, the dominant leg is my choice to sell at 175. So ultimately, the break even is the number that would make those columns balance, right? So if that's my dominant leg, I need something over here that if I plug it in would make the columns balance, because that's what break even is. Break even is the same dollars out as dollars in. So if I buy the stock at 170, and I stick it to somebody at 175, please note if I net the columns, it breaks even, which is the whole point. Okay, so we've done all 8 things I've helped Gallup before to do on a spread here. We've identified it as a debit spread. We have determined we want to exercise. Oh, excuse me. Hardest part to get, we didn't put that here, is we want it to widen. We want the difference in the premiums to get larger. Yeah, put that in there. Do the do, you'll always be right. That's the hardest part to get. Don't need to get it because debit, exercise, widen always goes together. But what we're referring to is the difference in the premiums. Let me just show that to you. Boom, boom. Here's the difference when we did the spread. But if I go to close this out, there, I'm going to close that out this way, close that out this way. If that difference ends up being larger than 5, I'm going to make money. So for example, I close out at for intrinsic value. Let's just say for intrinsic value. So let's say I close out at intrinsic value when the stock is 165. So at intrinsic value of 165, the 175 put I bought is now worth 10 points. Oh, I'm getting out my text. And my 160 put at 165 is 0. And so we made some money here because the difference was, let me get out my thing, the difference was 5. And now the difference is 10. And so I made 5 points. That's the hardest part to get. Don't need to get it because debit, exercise, widen goes together all the time. So we've identified this as a debit spread. We want the contracts to exercise. We want the difference in the premiums to widen. We've determined our max gain, max loss. Max loss is always what we paid for the option position. We can either memorize max gain and a debit spread is difference in the strikes less the net debit, or we can just say, well, 5 plus something equals 10. As a test taker, we know the break even is somewhere within 160, 175, the range. We can use our mnemonic, our memory aid, push, put, subtract from the higher. Or if you want, you can plug in the dominant leg to the T, the dominant leg being my obligation. Let me get that out there. My obligation, or excuse me, my choice. Just clean this up. You can just plug in the dominant leg, which is my choice to sell the stock at 175. And then ultimately, the break even is the number that if you plug it in there would make the columns balance. So you could just shop A, B, C, D, whatever that it works for you. That comes with practice. That comes with practice. I'm always showing you different things in different lectures, different tricks. So, you don't necessarily see all the same tricks and all the same lectures. Okay, so I hope you found that helpful. This will be in our typical, this will be in our typical Tuesday premiere. And I'll put it there, and it's a companion lecture. It's a companion lecture to short credit bullish transactions. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.